Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the North Idaho College January 17th, 2018 board meeting. I would like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would all join us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Board. And verifying a quorum, tonight we have all 5 board members, but shortly we will change things around. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes? Any changes to the minutes? All right, minutes are accepted. Thank you. And we have no one signed up under public comment, so that's going to take us to our favorite agenda item, celebrating success. Dr. Lita Burns, George McAllister.
Madam Chair, members of the board, it is certainly my pleasure to be able to introduce George McAllister tonight. He is our North Idaho College Molstead Library Director. George came to us about 5 years ago, fall of 2013, not quite 5 years ago, I guess. And I will tell you that his leadership and the team that he has to work with has really made an amazing transition for our library. In fact, if I were to retitle tonight's presentation, I would title it The Revitalization of North Idaho College's Library, because that's really what has happened. He has helped to transform it with his team. And I would tell you that students are absolutely the center of his focus for the library. He believes that the library is a learning resource center and has done everything that he can to ensure that students have all the learning resources they could possibly need in that center. So without further ado, I'll ask George to come up.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Chair Wood, trustees, President McLennan. I can't tell you how delighted I am to be here because, and I'll have to admit, this is my first board meeting, I'm embarrassed to say. But I really, really appreciate the opportunity to be here, to be able to just take a few minutes, and I'll be very careful not to go over my time because I know your time is very precious, and I just want to take in fact, Dr. Burns has already summarized my entire presentation, so without further ado, I'll turn the... I struggle to try to define what success means for the library, what you might want to look at as far as what the library has accomplished over the number of years that at least I've been here. And I hope you'll be able to see the slide presentation over here, but I think when we talk about libraries, we often refer back to Charles William Eliot, who was the former president of Harvard University, who was there for many, many years. And he portrayed the library as the heart of the university, as the lifeblood and soul of the campus, as a place where the pulse of the institution can be taken. And I always liked hearing those words because, first of all, they're beautiful, they're poetic, and they place the library where it should be, as a showpiece, as a monument in the college, and a reflection on what the college does. Unfortunately, that's always been turned around in many cases to, when you look at a library, to reflect on the fact that our library is bigger than your library. Our library has more resources than your library, and that's really not the way you measure libraries. You don't, it's nice to say we have X number of books. It's nice to say that we have a very beautiful library on a very beautiful campus, which is the case here, if you haven't been to the library. But libraries are measured in other ways, and we live in a very, very complex time for higher education. as a library, we're still asked to provide numbers, we're still asked to provide measurements, but I think in relating to these difficult times, I think what we're trying to do is show our value to the institution in other ways. We're trying to show that we're not a silo, that we just worry about collecting books and distributing them to students. We worry about how we can contribute to what is important to the institution, its mission and its values. So we really no longer rely on these idealized views of a library. We look now for ways in which our faculty and staff can contribute to what's going on in the college and what's important to the college. And you, of course, know what those issues are because you deal with them almost on a daily basis. And so I just want to take a few minutes to show you some of the things that we are going to do, that we do. And I can't help but mention just a few statistics. We have a very, very strong undergraduate collection here at the library. We have over 220,000 print and electronic resources, and we're averaging now over 9,000 student visits per month. This is the number we served last year, which is about 1,500 students per month over what it was in 2016. So we're continually growing, we're continually looking for ways to get students to come into our library and to find new ways to serve them. This is, however, it's not going to be about what we've accomplished as far as statistics are concerned, but what we're doing, what steps we're taking to try to link what we're doing to the mission, vision, and values of the institution. And so I just want to show you a few examples. Now, I purposely put this slide together in this way. This is probably one of the worst PowerPoint slides you'll ever see. You're not supposed to do this, and I violated a lot of rules in putting this slide together. But what I wanted to suggest to you was that we're doing a lot of different things. We're doing a lot of what we feel are very important work in collaborating with other programs and departments are doing on campus. And I'm just going to highlight a couple of them, but this is just a very partial list of all of the things that we do on a daily or weekly basis to try to work with different departments on campus to accomplish common goals. And so in this case, I'm just going to emphasize two items that we're doing as far as growing our collaborations with other departments on campus. And the first one is we've put together research guides, which, and this is an ever-growing list, where we have developed libraries of resources that students can go to, that faculty can go to that administration can go to, and find comprehensive research resources that we put together to help support whatever program they're doing. The example I have up there now is business resources. We have identified, for example, that the college is interested in business entrepreneurship and working with the community. We've identified that we're increasing our emphasis on business programs here, which could really benefit the region. So what we have done is we've put together a lot of very useful business resources that help you find demographics information, market research and analysis, and other sources of information which normally would take you just forever as a business person and an entrepreneur in the community to put together, whereas in this case, you can, just by using these resources available through the college, create an instant market analysis, for example, in a few easy steps. So a research guide is an example. Research guides are examples of some of the things that we're doing. And I'm just going to take a second to just show you what one looks like. We're working, for example, with the Strategic Enrollment Management Committee, And I'm just going to show you some data and statistics reports. For example, we can prepare, using those business resources, we can prepare an up-to-date report. For example, this one was done on January 3rd. We can prepare an instant demographic summary report on Kootenai County. And using these statistics, you can prepare market analysis, demographics, information, and so forth. It's a quick way for people interested in business or nursing or political science or art or psychology, some of the programs we've been working with, in which we have guides to help the faculty and their students and staff enter these programs and find relevant information. As the example shows, we also support a lot of committees. We're supporting strategic enrollment management work. We're supporting facilities planning work and so forth. So these are some of the things that we're doing that are usually outside the purview of the library, but I think benefit the activities and the mission that's going on here at the college. In addition, I wanted to point out another way we're collaborating with other programs on campus is we're starting a midterm and final study nights, and we're hoping to do this during fall and spring semesters, in which we bring groups together. We're working with College Skills Department, we're working with tutors, we're working with writing skills, we're working with, and we hope to work with ASNIC to make this a successful night. We're going to have a 3-hour night in February where they can come together and get help on their papers. If they have math problems, they can come to the library and sit down with a tutor, a math tutor, and who can help them with their homework. We're going to have snacks and prizes and that sort of thing. These are events, I think, that not only help students, but bring students who are perhaps not familiar with the library and can come in and become aware of all of the library services and resources that are available to them. Lisa here spearheads a lifelong learning information literacy program in which she works with various programs on campus like English, communications, and college skills, in which she develops customized instructional programs, and their students come into the library. She's conferred in advance with the instructors, and she helps students to make good choices relative to understanding what an authoritative research resource is, or to make some critical thinking decisions, to be able to put together papers and understand what the process is to put together papers. And she works in that way, as well as our other librarians in the library who meet with students individually, one-on-one, on a daily basis, to help them with these issues and more. So we do a lot of information literacy training, both in an instructional classroom setting as well as one-on-one, using appointments or just walk-ins. This is something else we do other than storing books. As far as another thing we do is we try to create positive student experiences in which, for example, a couple of examples that I've chosen are supporting the outreach centers. I don't know if you know we're doing this, but we created honor libraries where we placed library kiosks in locations, all of the outreach center locations, as well as the Parker CTE Center. In fact, there's even an honor library here in the sub. And we continually stock those with reading materials that students might be interested in, as well as leave brochures about the library and how we can support them in these outreach center locations. We offer the opportunities for them to meet with librarians on a virtual basis through the cloud, or we can meet with them by driving up to those locations and talking to their classes about library services, as well as we use IVC video conferencing. The other thing is that we've extended the borrowing time for students. In fact, got rid of all of our fines. We don't charge fines anymore for late or overdue materials. And we've extended that so that we can mail these materials to students and they can have them and then have ways to easily return the materials. We've also done a lot of promotional events to try to promote our resources, like finding creative ways to get students to come into to our location by having events such as a near space exhibit. We've had contests like the Great Gargoyle Giveaway Contest. We've had topical lectures. I think some of you have been to our lectures that we've had here on campus that we've sponsored. Just a number of ways to engage students and make them feel like their experience here at North Idaho College is enriching. We also work very closely with different departments and faculty on campus for example, as a library faculty and staff, we're currently participating in 24 committees here on campus. We also work closely with the teaching faculty to develop our print collection and our electronic collections. We find out what their needs are. We meet with them individually. We have an amazing collection development librarian in Brian Seguin, who enjoys getting to know and networking with different faculty and finding out what their needs are and how we can support them. And then we are very enthusiastic about supporting programs like career services or orientation in order to be able to support them and find ways that the library can participate. And we try to connect with the community because many people don't realize that the library is a resource for community members. They can come in and use the library and check out materials. So we want to be able to feel like we are part of the community and supporting the community. And again, I've listed a few things that we're doing, but I do want to emphasize, for example, that we're working with the Coeur d'Alene Public Library as well as the Community Library Network as well as the Coeur d'Alene Press to try to come up with an agreement where we can work to support their efforts to digitize back issues of the Coeur d'Alene Press. So we're continuing to work on that project as well as a number of other projects in the community. And two, I want to just point out really quickly is as far as the 9-point agreement, one of the tenets of the 9-point agreement is to provide resources so that the NIC Molstead Library has the most expansive Native American collection in the region, and I think we've lived up to that. We have over 2,500 print and electronic books in that Native American collection, as well as hundreds of DVDs and CDs that are available for curricular programs, as well as someone who is interested in Native American history and culture. And we've also put together a research guide on American Indian Studies. And then many of you are familiar with the Walden History Project, which is a digital archive of the history of North Idaho College and documents that are of interest to North Idaho College. We have received very generous support from the NIC Foundation and the A.K. and Ellen Walden Memorial Endowment. We have been able to digitize all of the yearbooks for North Idaho College, as well as a majority of the student newspapers back to the original founding of the college. We are entering historical photographs for people to use, as well as Tony Stewart's Human Rights Collection, if you're familiar with that, as well as many of you have been here for some time, the Popcorn Forum video lecture series from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. We have, I believe, over 400 videos up at now, and it's growing. And all these are available to you and the community for free on the internet. We have tons of ideas. This is the whiteboard we use to write down all of our ideas for what we have planned for the future. This is the fun of coming here and working at North Idaho College is people like Dr. Burns give us a lot of support to be able to do a lot of these creative things that we would like to do. And as she mentioned earlier, this is the most important part. We have an incredible faculty and staff in the library. It's a joy to come to work every day and work with these people. And just quickly to close, my wife is a marketing expert, and of course, I listen to my wife and everything that she says and agree with 99% of it. And she says, you know, it's great to have all your resources and services and that sort of thing, but you got to have a hook to get people into the library. And of course, all of you know what our hook is. We have gargoyles in the library, and if you haven't been to the library, come see our gargoyles. I hope I didn't go over my time. I love being here. Thank you. It's a pleasure to work at North Idaho College.
Oh, thank you. That's a great presentation. Board, any questions or comments? Judy?
Just one, and really pleased to see your emphasis on outreach to the community. For a long time, folks felt like the community college library wasn't available to the public, and yet everybody's helped make that library happen by funding for it. So this is something over the years I've watched, and thank you for doing that. We all should be enjoying it, and I have seen the gargoyles, and I'll be back to look at them again.
Thank you.
Trustee Banducci?
First off, George, well done.
Thank you.
You talked about 1,500 additional visits. Is there, and you showed us a list of the different initiatives that you guys have undertaken and the different things that you're doing, the different programs. If you were to guess, is there any one singular project or program or initiative that has shown the most fruit, or maybe first one or two? I don't know if there's something that kind of stands out.
Yeah, I think one of the things that has really increased our the number of students that have been coming to the library is before, I think many of us did not emphasize the importance of orientation. And orientation is incredibly important because this is the first opportunity that we have to meet with students and to tell them about library services. When I came here to the college in the first few months and I talked to a number of students, I talked to several students who had never even been in the library and they were close to graduating. So that really disturbed me. It upset me. You know, why was that the case? And I think it all boils down to participating in orientation where you only have a brief time to talk to them, but you can tell them exactly what the services are, even if they don't remember what those services are. I think you tell them, we're here to help. Just come in. We'll help you with any issue. In fact, all of our desk workers in the library become close friends with a lot of students simply because the students come in with their problems or their concerns, or I'm lost or I need help, and they become friends with them because they're willing to help them with just about any issue. So if we feel like if we can get them to come into the library, then we can tell them what our programs and services are and how we can help them.
Very good. Thank you.
Trustee Howard?
George, thank you very much for what you do to make North Idaho College the heart of Coeur d'Alene. You went through so many things that you're incorporating into your endeavors, and I was thinking the idea of bringing all these different activities into North Idaho College as the core of this community is just such a great idea. And although you probably have more work than you can handle, have you talked about creating some kind of relationship with the Museum of North Idaho and its archives?
We have. We've talked when we finish this first phase of the Walden History Project. We know that they have a tremendous resource, and particularly in the area of historical photographs, in relationship to the history of North Idaho College, as well as the history of the community. And I'm not sure they've had a number of plans to put that information on the internet and make it available. I don't know where they stand currently. But after we finish this first phase of the project, we'd like to work closely with them, because I think what we've done is we have the equipment and the system for getting these kinds of things up on the internet. And we've had over 8,000 views in the last year of these materials on the internet, and it's growing every year as we add more things. So we know there's a tremendous interest in the community as to the history of the college in the area. And if we can make these available for free on the internet, I think that's our goal. So we're more than happy to work with anyone to get these materials up on the internet and free for use.
Great. Thank you.
Good question.
You know, along that line, if I may follow up with Trustee Howard's question, as part of that, is there a point of emphasis or at least a segment of that that's going to be dedicated to Fort Sherman as a military guy? There's a tremendous military history there that I think is very interesting, quite fascinating actually, and so I didn't know if it would lend itself to that, where you kind of have a little takeoff that specifically focuses on the Fort Sherman history.
You know, I'm a history major, and so I love anything related to Fort Sherman and the history of Fort Sherman, and I would love to see something like that happen. We can structure this in any way we want. If you go there and you look on the site, we can structure editions where we can focus in on particular subject area. I'd love to be able to do that. I'd love to be able to have a whole section on the history of Fort Sherman and historical photographs and so forth. I think that's an excellent idea.
One more, following up on the follow-up, because also remember the State Historical Society has archives that are digitally, much of it is online, and some of the State Historical Society funding has come back to various small museums throughout the state to say, let's help folks to digitize the materials they have here. So the network with the internet, it soon becomes global. But in addition to Fort Sherman, the Native American collection you mentioned, the history information here, but also then statewide, I think you can become a conduit to all those kinds of digital archives. So thank you for leading the way on that.
Thank you. And just one more note, we would love to be able to see a joint project on the Coeur d'Alene Press, simply because we have a tremendous demand. We're currently looking at the Coeur d'Alene Press through microfilm, which is a very, archaic way to view those materials, and they're not searchable. And we would love to be able to create a way to get that amazing information on those back issues of Coeur d'Alene Press to the
that
internet.
is in the works, I know, through the State Historical Society. Again, had a national grant to help digitize the various county newspapers. So I can't exactly remember which part of it, but if that's not accessible to you now, I'd sure be glad to visit with you, because there has been specific funding to do the Coeur d'Alene Press. So again, we'll get more of that information out to the public.
Thank you.
George, did you bring your staff with you tonight?
We have a couple of staff members. Of course, you
They
know
stand
Lisa
up?
Kellerman.
Oh, please.
And I think Ann Johnson, who leads our Walden History Project and is our technical services librarian, is here. And Robin McLeod, who's our senior administrative assistant. She's the one that gets everything done in the library.
Yeah?
So she's here.
That's
Got a few
great.
people here.
Well, I wanted to compliment you. The work that Anne in particular is doing on the human rights collection. In my other life, I'm president of the Kootenai County Task Force on Human Relations. And so I'm very appreciative of you capturing the work of the task force, digitizing it, and then the Popcorn Forum by Dr. Tony Stewart. And that's just going to be, for instance, you have on film, it's a wonderful show of our former prosecutor from the 80s, Glenn Walker, who's just a hero, and he's debating Reverend Richard Butler on this campus. And it's a fascinating film, and Anne's capturing all of that and making it available to whoever wants to watch something like that. So I'm very excited about that project.
And then, Christy, isn't that available then, once it's online, to anybody in the world?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there are 400 videos up there now.
Yeah.
Just check back daily.
It's just wonderful. And then the other question I have is, there's going to be people that maybe want to make a donation to the library. Do you have a committee or somebody that someone comes forward? Like, for instance, I collect antique books, and I know my son's not going to want any part of that someday. and I don't know that the library would, but if people wanted to come forward, do you have a committee that looks at donations and
Well,
says,
of course, everything funnels through Rael Anderson and the
that makes
NIC
sense.
Foundation, because they're very good about working very closely with us to support our projects, as well as provide the conduit for us to meet with individuals who'd like to donate materials to the college. Not only do you get recognition for donating to the college, but we have the opportunity to meet and decide whether it's relevant to our collection.
Sure, all right. Well, we've kept you a long time. Thank you for your presentation.
And thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Before we go on to our special business of appointing a new trustee, we have a current trustee, Judy Meyer, our long-term trustee, who is going to go yachting, sailing around the world, have a little fun in her life. And Judy, you have some comments that you would like to make.
Does that surprise you all that I have some comments to make here? Thank you. Well, the first one I wanted to do was continuing board business, because as you know, I'm a member of Idaho Business for Education, IBE, and it's a statewide organization of about 100 different companies at the corporate level advocating for education. And right now, IBE is working hard on early childhood education. And you know we've worked hard on that with our there they are back there, Head Start, and the value of that before we, as a community college, can continue people's education. So I wanted to highlight that the IBE has been working with the Task Force on Higher Ed and with Governor Otter to develop some changes in the university system. And to that end, Governor Otter has requested a new position called CEO, or Chief Education Officer, to coordinate and consolidate the back office functions amongst the universities. So that'd be finance, human resources, purchasing, information technology, student support systems. This is not a chancellor position. The academic functions are still be overseen by the president. At this time, community colleges really aren't included in that process. But I'm especially pleased that all 4 college boards are meeting in Boise next week to coordinate efforts and explain to legislators not only the education value, but the economic development values of community colleges. Thank you, fellow board members, for heading to Boise. As we're all aware, the efforts to increase the go-on rate and achieve the 60% goal of citizens between the ages of 24 and 35 having a post-secondary degree of some kind has not been achieved and has a long way to go. So I believe the governor's efforts to increase education funding provide some areas for community colleges to have an important role. So I handed out a chart that I would call to your attention now to look at a second. And it's your very own personal chart, because I think as you look at it, it's titled a 60% fix, because that's really one of the major challenges we as a community college have. And you don't need to study it all now, but I would highlight to you that there are 2 boxes, one called the traditional path using 8 higher ed schools. That's the 4 universities and community colleges. Remember, there are 4 community colleges now, another good thing that's happening. And then the other box is about the new Idaho College Online, and the suggestion that that should be funded and begin to be happening is one of the things that I wanted to highlight to you, because that's going to provide more statewide outreach to rural areas and place-bound students, clearly what we do lots of already. And I think there's a very significant role for community colleges here that I want to highlight to our board. Next week's meetings in Boise provide a unique and timely occasion for community colleges to plan an implementation strategy. And now for some thank yous. In fact, before I go on to that, you haven't had much time to look at the chart, but I would highlight to you that on the left side, we talk about adding college counselors to implement. Think about you there, Graydon. And those counselors and coaches could be not only as we do now with dual enrollment, but also then out into the community, where the suggestion on the online colleges would be done through community libraries throughout the area, especially really rural areas. We already do our outreach to our satellite operations here. But in Salmon, Idaho, it's just a long ways to go anywhere to get help. And if we could, in fact, through the online college, and that's going to fit right in with community colleges, have some folks in that community to get folks comfortable enough to try some online classes. We know online doesn't meet all the needs, but it's a start at that outreach that I think is one of our goals. So unless somebody has questions about that, I'll leave that with you. That may go with you to Boise, because I think there'll be some more discussion there, and I hope there will be. I think it's an exciting opportunity. Okay, but the important thing for me was to be sure to thank you all for lots of good things over all the years, but especially at the December board meeting, you had a reception for me where many kind comments were said, so I thought, got you fooled, and thank you for those comments. I want to be sure to highlight there were 4 community college presidents at that gathering, 3 of them that retired and were chosen to live in this community. So we really are a community college. Personal notes and cards from campus community members, faculty for the bouquet of flowers, and foundations for the mug and the scarf. Thank you. Then you might remember the gift of the canvas photo of the NIC campus. And I think there was some extra work going on to get all the buildings that are on Select campus now in that picture, and I thank you for that. But probably more importantly than the buildings is the folks that are in the buildings. That's what makes community college here so special for me. It's the folks that work so hard in the classroom, both as students, faculty, staff. It's just remarkable, and it's a joy to be part of that. These feelings were confirmed by notes from the nursing students, faculty, and staff who took a minute to say thanks. A special thanks to my husband and partner, Steve, for his ardent support and patience over the last 25 years to help me run for election, discuss issues, debate strategies, and develop ideas to help provide a meaningful education for all in a cost-effective and accessible manner. I am proud and grateful for your support, Steve. Since our board meetings are online, I want to emphasize to the entire community what a remarkable gem we have in North Idaho College. NIC's partnership with the higher ed institutions, U of I, LCSC, here on the Coeur d'Alene campus provide wonderful advancement opportunities. On the other end of the education spectrum, dual enrollment with the high schools offer cost-effective use of time and materials, not seat time, but knowledge-based progress. And of course, our newest addition, in addition to the Rec Center, is the new Parker Career and Technical Center, welcoming students from all 3 school districts, and then from K-Tech, right across the highway, across the parking lot. All these partnerships are possible because of the dedication of so many hardworking instructors, faculty, staff, and administration. I have had a wonderful experience, and I just hope more people will get on campus, use that library, and discover what good things are happening here. I find this Sufi blessing sums up the philosophy and spirit of how this community college provides its many services. From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and by this we live. Even though I am moving up my resignation to be effective immediately, so the new board member may be sworn in, I can assure you all I will continue my crusading for education.
Oh, that's wonderful. I agree. Yeah. Well, Judy, that was a perfect statement. And one thing that we know about you is you wouldn't be leaving right now if you didn't feel good about the state of the college as it is.
Well said.
She's so passionate about education, particularly North Idaho College, that it took a lot for her to come to the decision. We all get there someday. We have other things to do in life, and she well deserves the other things to do. Board, any comments?
No, don't do that.
Let's make her get a little weepy.
I would like to. Judy, there's a little memento I'd like you to take with you. This is a Cecil pin,
Oh,
a lapel pin.
thank you, thank
That
you.
you can wear along with all your other stuff you get on.
Are you giving me the bird, Ken?
Yes, I am. Yes. That's a very special bird.
Oh, good, good. High flying, no doubt. Thank you.
The other thing we ought to give you.
You're gonna hit me with it? Oh, my identity.
Yes.
There you
All right.
go.
Good. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, board. It's been a joy to work with you, Mark, and I'm so happy that Rick is here and that I can leave comfortably and that you have a good new board member. And Christy, you're right. It would not be very satisfying to leave when things were not just going great. What a joyful time. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
There we go.
Bon voyage.
Yes,
that I will
and this is how dedicated she is. We will see her in Boise next week for Education Week. She's going to join us on her own time.
Yep.
She's wonderful. Board, that brings us to our special business. As you know, we met, I think it was 2 weeks ago, in a public board meeting, and we did a series of interviews with interested community members that would step up and take the district position, and I'm trying to remember exactly the district. 4? That's me. Anyway, Judy's spot. And Zone 4, I was right. And I first want to thank all of the community members that came out and took the time to come on this campus, tell us about themselves, tell our students and faculty about themselves and why they want to be part of North Idaho College. We so appreciate that, and really wonderful people. We were compelled to come to a decision that day, and we had a candidate that just stood out to us that we know very well. So we did make a selection of Dr. Joe Dunlap. Many of you know him, former president of North Idaho College, and we're thrilled with the opportunity to meet with or work with Joe. But we're going to have him to come up and take the oath of office so he can join us. Please, Dr. Dunlap, join us. Where would you like me to? I don't know. Chris, where would you like him?
Right in front of the camera.
There we go.
You'll raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Joseph Dunlap.
I, Joseph Dunlap,
Do solemnly swear or affirm
do solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Idaho,
and the Constitution of the State of Idaho,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and I will faithfully discharge
the duties of trustees of North Idaho College District to the best of my ability.
the duties of trustee of North Idaho College District to the best of my ability.
Welcome. Welcome, Joe. Please. Look at that. Ken's playing Vanna White. Fabulous. Good. Well, welcome. We're excited. Judy, we miss you. But we got a new guy. So, all right. Before we go on, I would ask the board if we could have a motion to amend the agenda. I do have a position that was Trustee Myers that needs to probably go to Joe. And so if I had a motion to amend the agenda, we would do that.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the agenda.
Thank you, Trustee Howard.
An officer.
Elect an officer, thank you. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Trustee Murray. All right, so all in favor? To amend the agenda? Aye. Aye. We all good? All right, thank you. All right, so we have an opening for our secretary position. And I don't know, both you and Trustee Banducci turned it down last time. Are you still feeling the same sentiment?
Yeah, I'll decline it this time.
Okay.
I'd also decline.
Okay, so then is somebody going to nominate the
I
new guy?
nominate Joe Dunlap for secretary of the board.
All right.
I second.
You second that. Fabulous. Discussion? No discussion from you. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Well, fabulous. You are the secretary.
Just got to get warmed up here.
Thank you. Yeah, and that was a very good idea. So your first order of business, Trustee Dunlap, is to read the mission statement that I overlooked when we started.
You good?
Is this on?
Yep.
Okay.
You're on all the time.
I'm on all the time. All right, the mission statement for North Idaho College is that North Idaho College meets the diverse and educational needs of students, employers, and Northern Idaho communities it serves through a commitment of student success, educational excellence, community engagement, and lifelong learning.
Thank you. Well said. All right, that takes us on to our constituent reports. First up, ASNC, Caleb Weeks.
Good evening, Chair Wood, Board of Trustees, President's Cabinet, President McLennan, and guests. As you know, it's only the second week of school. Everybody had a pretty good break, which was nice to hear. We still have one position in ASNC. We had 6 students apply who were interested. We have not yet filled it because the last interview was held Friday. So I will come to the next meeting with the next person, hopefully, and he can meet them and introduce them. It'll be nice to have a full board again, and I'm looking forward to that. Senator Edwin Amador took on carpooling project at NIC, which was nice to hear. He sent out an announcement to students, staff, and faculty, I think, on Cardinal Sink, and we had a number of interested applicants, which is always great to hear because it helps reduce the problem of parking. It also helps with carbon emissions and also just establishing connections with other individuals. That's all I have, and other than that, we're looking forward to a good semester.
Great, welcome back. Any comments or questions for Caleb? Thank you.
Thank you.
Staff Assembly, Susie Dean.
Good evening. I have to say it's probably the first time and maybe only time I have more to say than Caleb did. So our January meeting, this was the first time we made it available via Zoom. So IT got us set up in we changed our room. IT set us up so that employees who were not able to leave their desk were able to call in or click in on their computer and watch it online. We also then recorded it and posted it online afterwards so it can be watched later. We had a few glitches, some of the audio, there were some audio issues, but IT is working on it to get it fixed for the next time. So our guinea pig for this was President McLennan. He was, as I heard somebody refer to him, both the dog and the pony for the meeting.
Very good.
So he went through several topics. He talked to us about some of the recent meetings he'd had with community groups, and he talked about the message he tries to communicate to them, which is the value of a community college and what makes NIC different. He updated us on some state issues, some reports coming out of task forces, as well as items coming up with the budget, things that are different with the state budget coming up and some of those challenges. He then asked for questions, and I was very pleased people did actually ask questions. So he fielded some questions about the Cultivate process, about people were curious where the new AVP was going to sit, vital, important things. And we had an employee who expressed some concern that they'd heard some at the all-employee meeting. In the student video, there were several comments about offering 4-year degrees at NIC, and so there was some concern that we stay what we are, community college, while looking at whatever offerings there are, and the president dealt with that. And then he was really brave and he asked for rumors. Anybody have any rumors that they want to ask me about? And the only one that I remember was the ever-present parking garage. It always seems to come up. But overall, I think we were pretty gentle with him. I hope so, because he's supposed to come back in May. Tammy Iverson announced our Sterling Silver Award winner, which was Holly Edwards. And then we had an awful lot under the good of the order this time. People were excited about a lot of things going on. Holly Edwards talked to us about the Common Read program. Angie Rios from the Student Wellness and Recreation Center talked about some new options for the staff passes and this Fit Express event that they're doing, where you can go and take little bits of the different classes. It sounded kind of exhausting to me, but people that like Zumba and that sort of thing, it sounded very, very, a great opportunity for them to get exposure to what's offered. Then Nancy Edwards talked to us about the results of the St. Asnick Giving Tree. She said we had 17 children names submitted for that received presents, and then we had 22 food baskets that were requested. Thomas Scott out of eLearning talked about the rollout of Canvas, replacing Blackboard. And then Betsy Connery out of Communications and Fine Arts gave us the dates for the Jazz NIC Festival and then the Day of Dialogue also upcoming. And so that was it. We pretty, like I said, there were a lot of people excited about a lot of things that are coming up on campus.
Great.
And then with that, I would just say to Trustee Meyer, I wish you all the best, and I know your voice will be missed.
Very much agree with you. Thank you. Any questions for Susie?
Thank you.
Thank you. Faculty Assembly, Jeff Carr.
Trustee Wood, Trustees, President McLennan, assembled guests. Don't really have much to report this month. We heard a presentation from the Cardinal Reed Committee. They've told us about next year's Cardinal Reed Tribe on Homecoming and Belonging by Sebastian Younger. Just getting the word out there to the federal faculty members, and hopefully that they'll incorporate it into their lesson plans for next year's. Other than that, that's all we really discussed this month. We're just busily getting ready for the semester. And I, too, would like to thank Trustee Meyer for her service and new trustee, Mr. Dunlap, for joining us.
Thank you. Any questions for Joe? Thank you. And finally, the Senate, Lisa Kellerman.
All right, good evening. The Senate has not actually met yet this semester. We do have our first meeting tomorrow, so I don't have anything to report meeting-wise. But we did have a student senator resign at the end of last semester, like Caleb mentioned. So we do have a new student representative from ASNC, and her name is Sarah Haas. So she's a new senator. Any questions?
Any questions for Lisa?
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, it seems like everyone came back after a long holiday, and they're just starting to get into it again. So thank you for your reports, and that takes us to the President's report.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to get a little bit of help, well, actually a lot of help with my report tonight. I'm going to start with Graydon Stanley. And Graydon's going to introduce you to Amelia Dabrowski. I hope I said that right. And he's going to explain why we're introducing Amelia.
Great.
Graydon.
Thank you very much, President McLennan, Chair Wood, trustees, and other guests. It's truly my honor to reintroduce to you this young lady tonight. Some of you on campus probably recognize that name, Amelia. If you heard her speak, you would certainly recognize the accent as well. What you probably don't know about her is a project that she initiated at the end of last semester that we want to share with you. Amelia had an interest in working with those folks who are incarcerated and don't have access to books and library services. So she initiated this and was supported by some other students, and particularly Caleb Weeks, our student body president, that at the very end of the semester, she put information out across campus. She asked for people to donate books they were no longer using. They were successful in a short period of time of collecting over 2 full boxes of books, over 35 of those, that then they wanted to ship to the Correctional Alternative Placement Program, CAP it's called, that's a part of our incarceration system in the state of Idaho. It's down in Kuna. It houses 428 inmates or inpatients from around Idaho on a continuously cycling 6-month rehabilitation program. Chaplain Greg Turner accepted the books there and let the inmates know about this library that was provided through Amelia's efforts. He has told us that he's already started to shift the dynamics inside the library as a result of those books being there. Included in the boxes were about 30 odd Christmas cards written in by students here with all sorts of festive cheer and greetings, wishing a sense of community and happy holidays to those inmates who received them as well. Reports that we had back is it's been a tremendous success. We also know that this is something Amelia is wanting to continue to move forward. I'd like to also recognize, before we ask Amelia to stand up, to Follette and Mike Reed, our new director of that program. The question that she had was, how do we get the books from here to there? And there's a fairly sizable expense to ship those down to Kuna. We appealed to Follette and said, would you be willing to do this? And Mike immediately said, absolutely, and provided the expense and the method to get those books there. So we appreciate the collaboration of that. But it is truly my honor to introduce to you and ask her to stand up and give you a wave. She probably needs to say something so you can hear the accent as well. But we so appreciate the efforts of our student, Amelia Dabrowski. Sitting next to her, by the way, is one of our students, Julie, a good friend of hers. And down below is her service animal, that's Boots, who's also famous on this campus as well. So, Amelia, thank you on behalf of the college.
Here?
Right.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I'm Australian, so there's the accent. Yeah, the idea basically came to me. One of my friends is down there at the Kuna, the Correctional Alternative Placement Program, and essentially it's drug and narcotics, alcohol. Wow, I'm nervous. They go in, it's a 6-month roster system. So they come in, as Graydon said, it's a continually cycling rehabilitation program. And so they go in, they learn different skills like how to build their resume, life skills, all the things that we sort of take for granted. And this friend of mine who's gone into the facility, his feedback presented one particular way. I'm hearing things from a college student sort of standpoint. And so when he's telling me about the things that he does, the things that he does within the program, I'm hearing things as a college student where it's like, I know how to bridge that gap. And so when I asked him, what sort of things are there at the library? And his response, was really dismal. He was saying, honestly, there's only sacred text and there's romance novels. And to me, when I hear that, I think there's not enough. There's not enough. If someone's going to rehabilitate their life, then they need to start with a really solid foundation. And to me, that means getting to know who you are and your place in society. And why not start with education? And so I asked him, what sort of things would you want to read, as a sample population of one, in your 428 population facility, and even this is a tiny subset of our state. And he essentially said, anything that you can throw at us, anything. And so, okay, so I started with transcribing TED Talks. And so I started with 5, 6 TED Talks, and he said, just whatever you can, just everyone's eating it up, they're loving it. We're having discussions about these big ideas and this and that. And it sort of became more and more, and it sort of, I thought, okay, maybe if I send books in. And so I asked a couple of people, what do you think about this? And it was actually Alex Harris, who's not here at the moment. I asked him, what do you think about it? And he said, do it. Do it. If this is something that you believe in, that they need, do what you can. And so he put me into contact with Graydon, as well as Caleb, and also George McAllister from the library, who spoke earlier. And by essentially taking this on by myself, just asking people, what do you think? What's this? Asking just the questions, what should we do? They're basically saying, whatever you think, go with it. You've got, the gall to confront this issue. And so that's where the conception of the idea of sending them all of our materials that we no longer use. So things like previous semesters' textbooks, novels, study materials, this sort of thing from previous semesters. Because as one student, my closet is full of previous semesters' things that are still good in themselves, but because they get updated every single semester, they gather dust. And to me, that's removing something from, from circulation, whereas there's other people that I've just found out about that really need something to help enrich their lives. And so that's kind of the idea and how it sort of formed. And then Graydon sort of filled in the rest of it. So, I approached a couple of more people, and within about a week, it just went from all these ideas to, okay, apparently this is happening. So we had 6 boxes, I think it was, all up. We had 2 in the sub, 2 in the sub, 1 in the My Health and Sciences building. There were 2 in Boswell, and I think they're just all around campus. And so by having them in different buildings, we were able to collect materials like psychology, biology, chemistry, physics. There were study skills in there. There was economics, just everything, a piece of all of the subjects and things that we as a facility have. And I think it just goes to show that as a community, when we pool all of our resources together, as Chaplain Greg Turner was saying, this influx of just 35 books was enough to change more than 400 lives. And when we sort of stand back and look at the demographics of Idaho, it really is unfortunate. We do have a drug and alcoholic problem. We really do. But to me, this is a step in a completely different perspective about how to deal with that with us, with the best things that we can offer. It happens to be secondhand materials, but to them, this is a saving grace. And I think that this is something that really we can push forward for and really have a bigger, better, more longer lasting, positive, all of these things that NIC stands for. We can now reach an entirely new subset of our state. So,
Very good, Amelia. Well, I'll tell you, you stand for all the good things NIC.
thank you.
And wonderful project. Love hearing from you. And I didn't see Boots. What's he doing back there?
He's telling me that he's ready.
Love hearing about your project.
How's that
Board, do you have
dinner?
any questions or comments for Amelia?
Just thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to add my thanks as well. I think we may have an enrollment or more coming out of this interaction as well. So
Good.
good job.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other?
Thank you. Next, I had the opportunity on Friday to attend Art Spirit Gallery, where they held an event memorializing the many contributions that Harold Blaze made to our community, and we thought it would be a good idea for the board to hear a little bit formally about some of the contributions that were made to our community by this amazing artist. And to help us do that, I can ask art faculty member Michael Horswell to come up, and he's got a short PowerPoint for you.
Great.
Evening.
Welcome.
Let me just pull this up really quick here. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate having the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about Harold. I'm going to show you a few images of the work that he's done of our collection that we have here at the NIC campus. I just wanted to preface this brief presentation with my first experience with Harold. I worked with him a little bit at the Harding Center, putting in an installation there. And Harold's an eclectic guy. He's a crazy guy. So we were all supposed to be working with concrete and wood and chicken wire, making these really goofy things for the kids there. And so I was with a couple of guys, and we were supposed to be making this gate, and so we're over there working, and we have like the tape measure and these straight edges, and we're kind of trying to get it all cleaned up, and Harold kind of comes over and goes, what are you doing? So we're just, trying to get it all straightened up and kind of get all cleared up. He goes, I've never met a straight line that I like, so put away the rulers. I don't want straight lines at all. So he literally took the rulers from us. He'd never, ever since then, I don't know if you've ever seen much of his work, I'll show you some examples, never really liked the idea of the notion of precision in terms of sort of the disconnect between the human making processes and the work that he had. So he was an amazing guy. A couple of things just to come to mind. An amazing thinker. He was always inquisitive about anything. I've had so many different conversations with him about so many different aspects of life that I always leave after talking to Harold just going, I gotta look into that. I haven't even thought about that before. Prolific artist. He constantly was making art on a daily basis right up to the very end. He had new pieces in the show at the Art Spirit Gallery that he had just completed days before he passed away. He was a teacher, he was a collaborator, he had a great sense of humor. He was just a terrific human being, and we were very fortunate to have some of his pieces on campus. So I'm just going to show you some of the images that we have and kind of walk you through these if you haven't had a chance to see them. I'll also put a note in for the fact that we do have a book of Harold's work in our library, and I would really encourage you, if you have an opportunity, to go over and check it out. It's way worth looking at. He's a regional master. His work spans this entire region from Seattle down to Denver and all over the place. So thank you for letting me share this with you. Where am I pointing this thing? Make it work. Let's try this. Just a couple of things is basically, he's been doing this since the 1950s. He started as an enamel artist, selling his wares on the streets of Spokane. Just last year, he received the Mayor's Awards for Excellence in the Arts. But many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with his work over in Spokane, the Centennial piece in the river, the Rotary Fountain that's being refurbished now there and should be complete by the end of this year. The Lantern, 1974, are just some examples of some of the work that he has done in Spokane. His work is really evident to all of us in terms of what he's done, but what's oftentimes overlooked is the influences that he's had beyond that. He's done numerous workshops and exhibitions throughout the region. He's done a number of workshops here, working with art students, working with humanities students, working with the faculty here. And I would just point out that one of the women sitting on the ground is Allie Vogt, my colleague for 30 plus years, was one that brought him here in 1974. So his influence goes beyond just the works that we see. So what we have on campus are a number of pieces. I'll just walk you through these. This one, I Must Go Down to the Sea Again, is on the south side of Headland. I'm sure many of you have seen this. It's a black, just check my notes here, like a black marble piece. And it was in honor of his good friend Jack Steve, who taught engineering here. Harold evidently was one of the first people to windsurf on Coeur d'Alene Lake. And so this has to do with the idea of windsurfing and the feeling of windsurfing. I guess Jack Steve was part of that, and they did a lot of playing in the lake. So this piece is a really in memoriam to Jack Steve. Many of you have seen this piece by the Children's Center. It was created through the Citizens Council for the Arts, who bring us Art of the Green. In 1996, students, community members worked with Harold making this piece using the styrofoam structures that he used and sort of formulated into sort of perfection as the forms from which he then poured concrete into, and that's what we have. That was used as a stage frequently for many of the events on Art of the Green. These are the enamel panels that are located right when you walk in the Boswell Hall lobby. He worked with a number of students in creating these. These are actually enamel, which is a vitreous powder that you essentially bake. And what you're looking at, the individual panels, are the fronts of washing machines, which evidently, from my conversation with Harold, make really wonderful surfaces to enamel on. So I've been, ever since talking to him, looking for old washing machines to work with. A couple of them are the students' work. The one on the fourth one over from the right is Harold's piece. The other ones are students' pieces. The one on the far right is from our ceramics instructor, Lisa Lyons, who retired a number of years ago. But this is a good example of sort of the collaborative work that he did with the faculty and the students. This is an interesting piece. It was originally, I didn't really know the history of this piece. I discovered this over in the old blue storage building off of Mullen. It had been stored there, and there had been some water damage to it, so I collected it and brought it over to Boswell Hall, and I thought it'd be a really great opportunity to take the Aspiring Artists Club and see if they wanted to refurbish it. So they sanded it down, repaired it, painted it, and then we installed it right on the wall inside the Boswell lobby. But evidently it was donated from Mary Jean Ferris from Spokane, and it had gone through many manifestations, but it's now located in the lobby there. So it's a good example of the kind of work. This is just basically wood pieces. Reflection is one of the last pieces he did for NIC. This was in memoriam for his great friend Pat Flamia, who was the first president of the Citizens Council for the Arts. Many of you may have known Pat and Sue Flamia, who are very important members of the Citizens Council for the Arts and just the arts in Coeur d'Alene as well. It's basically three waves. The three forms that you're looking at are supposed to represent three waves, which symbolize constant, continuing constants. There's a plinth, a stainless steel plinth behind there with a Native American poem inscribed on the back, and then if you've been over there, there's a bench that's made of teak wood, and on the bench is a cast version of Pat's sketchbook. Pat was an incredible artist, watercolor painter, drawer, and they were deep good friends, and so that was a testament to Pat Flamia. So that one's just to the south of the Children's Center. You've probably seen this. This one we just got last year. It's on loan from the Citizens Council for the Arts. It's in the Boswell Hall hallway when you walk straight in. It was a piece that he did at the Harding Center with kids. Typical construction for Harold: concrete, chicken wire, whatever you can find, attaching it to it, painting it, and going crazy. So I just love it. It's just the goofiest thing in the world, this giant corn cob. As a group of those students, they move those kids through the school, and that big red thing that those little kids moving around. They were parked out in front of this the other day and was asking me about it. And this one kid goes, "It's the biggest piece of corn I've ever seen." I said, "Huge." I said, "Well, it's not really corn, it's art." "Oh, it's still big." So it's really gathering a lot of interesting comments from people. So part of his work is so eclectic that it really makes you stop and look at it and sort of appreciate the strangeness of it. So, and then finally, this is a quote that Harold had. It was just in the paper the other day. "Art teaches me a little about what I was, where I came from. It speaks to me and tells me something about the promise for the future." And so this was in testament to Harold Belay. So I appreciate having the time to speak to you guys a little bit about Harold, and I hope you take an opportunity to take a look at the work that's around campus. Also, I left some of the postcards for the show with Shannon over here. The last exhibit that he had, there's many pieces down there, many of them he's just completed. But this exhibition will be up through February 3rd at the Art Spirit Gallery. So if you have a chance to check that out, you might want to give that a shot. So. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Michael, you are a regional master of the arts yourself, and that was a beautiful tribute to Harold.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Appreciate
Board,
it.
any questions on? Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to ask Laura Rumpler to introduce a couple things. One, you have at your places the just hot off the press, right? Our annual report to the community. And then she's also going to, so I'll let her introduce that, and then we're going to talk a little bit about Education Week, Higher Education Week in Boise. I had the opportunity to go down last week with now retired Trustee Meyer, attend the IBE annual meeting, but also attend the Governor's State of the State speech where he outlined his priorities, notably the higher ed CEO, or COO, however that turns out, increasing opportunity scholarships. But I think, and we'll talk about this here in just a minute, really getting into the uncharted waters this time around. As you know, we submit our line item request each year. Last year, process was changed up a little bit. We were directed by DFM that if the governor his office did not support a particular line item, that we were not to speak to that line item as we made our JFAC presentation. And so that did give us something to talk about because we had some that the governor recommended. So we could talk about those, and then we could respond to questions about the other ones as they came up through the JFAC meeting and as well as in the other committee meetings. This year, the governor has recommended 0 line items for all 8 publicly funded higher education institutions, and that same directive is there this year. So we're scrambling around a little bit right now. We're putting together our talking points, but I'm going to let Laura, she's got some packets she's going to hand out, and I don't know if you want to go through the report to the community first and then get into that, but I'm going to turn it over to Laura.
President McClendon, last year the board did not like that format at all, and so it sounds like we're really not going to like it this year. But go ahead, Laura, convince us.
As we are a community college that is adaptable and nimble to the needs of our citizenry and the workforce that we serve and our students, we will be adaptable and nimble as we head down to Boise this next week. So what I wanted to do this evening is just share with you a number of things that you have in front of you, your packet that we prepared for you as we head down to Boise, as well as President McLennan is correct, report to the community that is literally hot off the presses. We just got it this afternoon, so we wanted to make certain that you had a copy of it as well. And you will have a few samples in your packet as what I'm sharing with you that you'll have as part of your resources as we head to Boise and JFAC and the Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee presentation, as well as our other presentations. And just to note that in my suitcase, as we head down to Boise, I will have additional pieces of information and resources and tools for you to use as we head down there next week. So first off, just to touch bases on this, as we do for both accreditation as well as telling our story and sharing the advocacy of what we do here in North Idaho for North Idaho College, is the report to the community. So definitely take a look through this as we get ready to go down and advocate for our college. And I will have also copies too if you want to be able to share them with folks and as you're meeting and greeting with folks down in Boise as well. Now, if you wanted to open up your folders, though, let me navigate you a little bit to the resources and talk a little bit about what next week's going to look like. So you have your itinerary, very similar format to what we've had last year. And if I can use a little personal privilege and digress just for 1 second, I also wanted to say thank you to all of you. I literally was day 3 or 4 boots on the ground as I boarded that airplane with you all last year, going down to Boise for JFAC and our higher ed and our education committee. And so you were just so welcoming and gracious to me as I joined the North Idaho College family, everyone. And now I've got a year under my belt.
It's been a year.
Yeah, it's been a year, and we're getting on that
Everything's
airplane
changed.
again together. So, okay. So, as we were talking about, you could call it the Wild Wild West, or as I've been joking the last couple days with a few colleagues, choose your own adventure, like those books when you were a child or maybe sharing with your grandchildren. We don't quite know what the next step's going to look like when we head to Boise, but we are prepared and will react and respond. So if you look at starting fresh Monday on your schedule, we do have the Joint Finance and Appropriations Committee, JFAC. We are preparing right now remarks for our president to share, and we'll be navigating through the step-by-step process of the guidelines and the requests of how we will format those remarks. What we will be doing is thematically sharing what is truly important to us as a community college, what we stand for, and the priorities and initiatives that we are looking future forward with regards to how we are going to make an emphasis on the go-on rate, how we continue to have North Idaho College be accessible to all, and the different works and the work that we are doing in partnership too, all the way down through the K-12 system, and building those relationships and cultivating those students, and looking at all the different pathways to higher education. So yes, we do have bumpers and guidelines with regards to what we can and cannot say in a very diplomatic fashion, but we will also be finding ways to share our story and our work there. If you flip onto the back side, one of the things we listened to many of you last year when we were in Boise is we overlap with the Idaho Chamber Alliance. And they are down there in Boise at the same time as us, meeting with legislators and doing united work together as the chambers from across the state of Idaho. So one of the opportunities we've presented for you on this trip is that we will be joining our chamber contingencies from Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and Post Falls and Sandpoint, and you'll get to share lunch with legislators and be part of that chamber luncheon on Monday. Then in the afternoon, we'll have our presentations with the Senate Education Committee, and again, back to that, adapting and figuring things out in the next couple of days as we roll into next week. We are working with our counterparts, and the president is working with the other 3 community college presidents as we are shaping and forming and getting, even this afternoon, we're getting additional questions from the leadership of those germane committees as to what they want to hear from us. And what we're preparing to be able to share that afternoon. Then as we look at Tuesday, we will do the same thing, a joint united presentation with the other 3 community colleges to the House Education Committee. You will see that we have a luncheon for the community college trustees and presidents lined up for you, and then there will be the ICC meeting in that afternoon. We are still working with the governor's scheduler with these small pockets of time and availability and the opportunities we have within your schedule to get one-on-one time with you and the governor, and if not the governor, we're working with the lieutenant governor staff as well and the scheduler to see how we will be able to work on getting some time with you and him then. We will probably have an updated itinerary for you when we see you at the airport on Sunday evening, and as things continue to evolve with that schedule, we'll keep you posted. As you see in the rest of your packet, like we have done in previous years to help support you and to help you navigate through this process, we have a JFAC seating chart. You can see the different folks that are going to be in that room with JFAC, as well as on the back, this will be your first opportunity to see what we call the ICC piece, which is the Idaho Community College Consortium piece. This is the first time that the 4 community colleges have been able to put together a united piece that really speaks to the unique value of community colleges. And as we move forward with a lot of change that could be happening at the state level with regards to systemness and other potential changes, we want to make certain that we continue the drumbeat for community colleges, that we are unique and different. We have a very specific mission to serve our communities and the broad range of students that come to us. And so this is an overarching piece for our legislators as well as other business leaders to really tell that story. Embedded within that is a draft for you of a piece that we have prepared that is specific to North Idaho College and our priority initiatives. We will be continuing to adapt and work on this piece, and I will give you a more updated piece as we head into next week, that as we navigate this fine line with regards to the art of diplomacy and not speaking about our line items, but also sharing our key priorities and initiatives, we will have pieces for you to be able to use and share that allow us to do both. And then on the left-hand side of your packet, we've shared with you a bundle of facts and information. Those are those facts and information pieces that we present that gives you the ability to have quick, on-hand, good pieces of information about our college. And then also, too, in case you wanted to write a personal note to someone that you cross paths with when you are in Boise, or if you wanted to hand off a little token gift from North Idaho College, these are the note cards that we created this last year that have pictures from across our campus for you to use. So
that's wonderful. So could we go over this one more time?
Sure.
We're going to go before the Joint Finance Committee, and we're not going to talk about money.
Well, so we are and we aren't. So we're going to elevate it up to more purpose where we are in terms of, let's just say, one of our line item requests, for example, is these navigators or pathfinders. That's the idea where we take our full-time advising career folks and we put them in the high schools to work directly there. And everybody that we've talked to about this, because of we are interacting with business and industry. We know the many pathways that are there. We're creating many of them. And so the idea, and this really came up through the K-20 subcommittee on the governor's task force, which is why I was interested in that group, is how do we get a bigger conversation in the high schools around what are the career pathways that students could have access to. Well, that Pathfinder is a specific request to help us do that. High schools are in favor of it. Everybody we've run this idea across is very enthusiastic about it, including our local delegates, representatives, some of whom are on JFAC. So if some of my comments in JFAC will be more about our interest in engaging that way, but stopping short of saying this is a specific request
this is how much it's going to cost.
This is how much it's going to cost, and this is what we're going to do. We'll talk about other examples of how to create more capacity in the conversations and interactions between North Idaho College and the different ways students can see themselves as college material. It's not just transfer four-year, that there's so many other pathways. So we're still fine-tuning that, and there are other building capacity for access to baccalaureate, specific baccalaureate pathways. We talked to the work, we would mention the work that we're doing with the University of Idaho and the computer science program, but not speak specifically to the line item request that says we need additional faculty to do that, but saying that these are things that we're trying to build capacity in. And so when we get to the House Higher Ed and the Senate Higher Ed Committee, the question is, do we go in a little bit more specifically with some of that information, which is what you have there, or do we pull that up a level and talk more thematically about what North Idaho College's interests are? It would surprise me immensely if our our delegation, members of our delegation, did not ask me specific questions about our line item.
Well, I sure hope they do. We should
Because
encourage them to.
we're in an odd place where we're going to the Finance Committee to talk about what?
Right,
Well, we can't talk
exactly.
about finance, so what do we talk about? We can elevate it up to some of these thematic things and go back into the mode of really selling the value proposition of North Idaho College or the community colleges in general. But we really do want them to get to that. And without knowing exactly what our legislative delegation is going to do, again, I would be surprised if those questions didn't come up. So in my comments that we're working through, I'll have a narrative, and you will also have a narrative for you to talk with anybody who will ask you about them, or you're not bound to anybody.
Sure,
Talk
I
about anything.
need the dollar amounts.
So you're going to have very specific talking points to those line items so that you'll be able to talk broadly and specifically with anybody about those. Again, I will be prepared in all the interactions that I have formally to discuss those in specificity.
Board, do you have kind of comments on this? This is a very different format from, I mean, every year it kind of ratchets it down a little tighter for us. And it's very strange. Could you tell me one more time, this is coming from the governor's office?
Well, I think it's through DFM specifically on behalf of, so. Could I offer one other thing?
Absolutely.
The other thing that I just want to acknowledge, first of all, I want to this is really a well-done piece. Laura and her team did an outstanding job putting it together. But I also want to acknowledge Laura for that ICCC piece. North Idaho College took the lead in developing that. That came out of one of our ICC meetings. Actually, Trustee Howard had the idea. We really need to create something that collects more of a vision of all of the community colleges and what we're trying to accomplish. Laura just did this is the first one out of the gate. We're going to be adjusting and adapting that. It's available in electronic format. We want to get it out to our chamber boards, Rotary groups, Kiwanis organizations, and we'll always be able to insert an audience-specific one-pager within this to talk about the North Idaho story relevant to that group. And so, just one other comment on the JFAC and the line items and the governor's task force. All of this is connected. One of the themes that came out of the governor's task force, although it's specifically started to get connected to this idea of a higher education CEO role, that's really not defined for us yet. There's a lot of open question around what that would like. There's been some editorials about that in the Statesman about, are we putting the cart before the horse? Should we determine a little bit more about what we need this to look like before we move down that road? Having said that, the theme that came from the governor's task force had to do with the idea of systemness, and I talked about that last meeting, and the idea that are there efficiencies, are there things that could be gained by having more coordination and collaboration among the institutions. Well, since that has picked up a little bit of steam, I can tell you that the interest on the other three community colleges, gratefully and fortunately, and I think serendipitously, we're already down that road of creating this ICCC coalition of community colleges to help brand ourselves as a unique segment of higher education. And had a teleconference call with the other presidents earlier this week, and there's a lot of enthusiasm for moving in that direction, so that we can both demonstrate and prove and celebrate our value proposition to the legislature, to the governor's office, to our communities that we serve, about the value proposition that community colleges provide to the state of Idaho and all the people we serve.
Thank you. Board, any questions for President McLennan?
I see Laura's hand up.
Oh, certainly.
Chair Wood, just one more point. As I know we've shared, we will be sharing additional materials and different variations in the materials, but specific to your question, even though it doesn't specifically say line items, the insert that we did give you this evening, if you'll look at those 4 different areas of the high school Pathfinders Community Science Program, first year experience and summer completion initiative, and within those paragraphs, the cost associated with those, those could, in theory, be some of your talking points that you may need to have in one-on-one conversations with folks outside of those meetings.
I very much appreciate that, Board. I guess we have our work cut out for us, that we need to chat individually with the members of JFAC. I have a hard time understanding why they would take that format. But, go ahead, Trustee Howard.
Well, I think it's become clear over the last couple of years that I may be off base on this, but quite frankly, I don't think our presentations at JFAC really have much of an impact. And all the work is being done either before or afterwards. And so, whereas before, I think we had an opportunity to acquaint people who didn't know about community colleges on JFAC with what we do, that opportunity has been taken away. A lot of the budgeting, a lot of the work that's being done is being done beforehand. And so the presentation really is fairly meaningless.
Yeah, it's becoming watered down, and we focus on themes instead of our specific needs, and so that's frustrating. So we'll be busy on our own. Elected officials should always be talking to elected officials. Thank you, President McClendon.
Thank you. Just one last thing to
Sure.
report. This will make this very brief. We on March 1st, we are required to submit our last ad hoc report to the Northwest Commission. You may recall that the Commission asked us to respond to recommendations over several years. This is the last report of 4 reports. Does not require board action. This is a report on an update on core themes. We'll finish this up in the next week or 2. I'll circulate that electronically to the board. You're not meeting in February anyway, but I want you to see what's going in. I've looked at a draft of it. It's very well done. I think I don't want to say perfunctory, but it's one of the things that we need to do along the pathway with the commission. So you'll get that.
Okay.
That's all I have to report.
Thank you. All right, that takes us to our KTEC report. Trustee Banducci.
Yes. We had a meeting on the 10th of January out at KTEC. I have a few items to speak to. In regards to the 3 sponsoring school districts, Coeur d'Alene, Lakeland, and Post Falls, right now there are 380 students from those 3 school districts. Coeur d'Alene has 169, which is about 44%. Lakeland has 112, so about 29%. And Post Falls has 99, or about 26%. So fairly even distribution. Coeur d'Alene being the largest district, we would expect to have the most students. Lakeland has a little bit of a home court advantage, and they promote it quite heavily. So even though they're the smallest, they have the second highest total. I think they're very pleased with the participation that they've got there. That is also inclusive, you know, often think of it, of Timberlake also, sure, with the high school there, and Rathdrum also. The annual Hard Hats, Hammers, and Hot Dogs, which is quite an event, is currently scheduled for the 20th of April, so 4/20/18 will be they call it the H4. Hard Hats counting is 2 of the H's, in case you're wondering. And that usually gets a very good turnout. I think Brad's pretty familiar with that. You've been to that, haven't you, in the past? I'm not sure if
I had a little something to do with it.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're a little familiar. Yeah. I don't know if you'd like to add anything on that or speak to it at all. I'm sorry, I didn't prepare you for that.
I've got some background with Hard Hats. It really started as a way to give kids hope, because we saw a lot of kids, especially in the alternative schools, that were losing hope as early as October. So Vicki Isaacson and a few others, we got together and came up with this idea and stole it from Spokane's Pizza Pop and Power Tools. We just changed the name and got some sponsors, and it's a great event for kids to get hands-on with a lot of different machines, and it's a good exposure for kids and gives them some hope that they can actually find employment, maybe even step across the parking lot over to NIC. So it's a great program.
Thank you for given us some more context to that. And some may not be aware, but if I'm unable to make a meeting at K-Tech, Brad's the guy, is backing me up on that. So we've got a good guy there in case I can't do it. So from 3 Ps to 4 Hs, I guess. You said pizza, Pepsi, and
Pop and power tools.
Pizza, pop, and power tools, yeah. So anyway, that's coming up. A couple of things I was asked to just extend some thank yous. One was, Stan Olson brought this to my attention. Apparently, and I'm going to summarize it a little bit. I called it the Academic Proficiency Assessment, K through 12. The actual title is the CPS Data Summit. And apparently there was a version 1.0, a version 2.0, and then some continuation. And apparently Rick and others were quite involved with this. And so they wanted to extend their thanks to us for our participation and our help through that process and just being so engaged and just caring, you know, and reaching out to our local school districts, our K through 12. You know, it's kind of their big brother. So but Superintendent Olson particularly wanted me to extend the thank you for that. They were very pleased with our role in that. And apparently we helped foster and mentor, and we had a lot of parts of that. So we were represented very well. Spoke well of us. Along that vein, they had a instructor out there, a rather beloved instructor, a second semester CNA instructor, and due to some family, just, I don't know if I want to say tragedy, but just some circumstances, but sad circumstances, she had to submit her resignation, rather short term. And that put them in a bit of a, oh my gosh, what are we going to do for second semester? Apparently, they reached out to our folks here, and I see Cassie smiling and nodding her head, and I'm not sure exactly who all the folks were involved with that. It was Doug initially, and then through, and Evan. Thank you, Cassie. But we put the word out and said, hey, they need help. We need someone. I think they ended up with 7 candidates applying for the position, and they're extremely thrilled with the person that they have decided to hire. Very, very competent, extremely qualified. And so they wanted to really thank us for helping them fill that position, because, you know, they were like, and they threw it out to us, and all of a sudden there was quite a candidate pool. And so they just were very grateful for that. It really solved the problem in a very quick and timely manner, and they're, again, thrilled with the hire. Apparently, just, if I remember, I think they have a master's degree in RN. I mean, tremendously qualified individual. So anyway, so part of our partnership with some of the other local educational institutions, whether it be just that and K-Tech or our local school districts, and if anybody's wondering why I bring up about the Coeur d'Alene High School, if you're watching on TV, is on the board, it's the 3 superintendents, myself, and a couple of industry representatives, Ron Nilsson and Tom Power right now. And so that's the board of 6. So we get to talking about what's going on in the school districts with the superintendents and our interactions with them in NIC. So for a little backstory there, context. And our next meeting for K-Tech will be not until the 25th of April. So we've got a little bit of a gap. Although, as some of you are aware, we've had a little situation with our heating system out there. And so should the need arise, we may or may not be called into a special meeting, depending on how that unfolds and proceeds. But right now, the next scheduled meeting will be on the 25th of April. Great. And I think that concludes my report, unless anybody has any questions.
Board, any questions? No? Very thorough. Thank you. All right, that takes us on to our next agenda item, our old business. This is our second reading. Tab 1, dual naming of NIC facilities. Graydon, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Wood, Trustees, President McLennan, and other guests here tonight. Thank you for the second reading of this. You'll recall our explanation about this. Our 9-point agreement that we've had with the Coeur d'Alene Tribe will be celebrating. This year's the 20-year anniversary of that, and there's been a number of folks meeting for quite some time now to plan out that celebration. Those of you familiar with the 9-point agreement know that it covers a variety of areas, and there's been some fabulous progress made to that end. I don't know that you've met, and he's no longer here, but Dr. Victor Begay, who was hired to work in that area. And when you look at the curriculum that's been developed and the way the program has been emphasized, there's great strides in what's being offered, and that was one of the provisions of the 9-point agreement. Other parts that you might recall are the story tour, that's a portion of that, and there's a committee of folks working on it. And included in the story tour then is the identification of buildings and facilities and places on our campus. One of the provisions of the 9-point agreement was that there would be dual naming of those spaces and places. And so we've had a committee working on that as well. I want to recognize certainly from the Coeur d'Alene tribe and the education department there, Dr. Meyer and Norma Pion, many of you recognize. And then Raymond Brinkman particularly has been instrumental as he's taught classes here at the college, is really the specialist in the Coeur d'Alene language. And so we've worked closely with them to look at catching up with. It had been prior to 2010 that we had done some of this dual naming. So on the chart that was given to you at the last meeting and then updated tonight, there are 11 facilities, some that were already in existence and a couple that we've built in the last few years that we're suggesting the dual names. These were provided, of course, by Raymond and that group. They've gone through the process that our policy describes in having those approved by President's Cabinet, running those through as an advisory vote by the Senate, and then bringing those in front of you. Our intent, once these are approved, would be to announce them at the celebration that we'll have in April. By the way, American Indian Heritage Week is April 2nd through the 7th. While we don't have a specific date during that time frame, our intent is to have that celebration with the tribe here on our campus someday during that week, and so we'll give you an update as that nears. So I'm asking for your approval then of these 11 different facilities and the dual naming that's been suggested. The one update that I wanted to bring to your attention, you recall at the last meeting that I had inaccurately reported Meyer as Meyer Health Sciences altogether, and it's Meyer Health and Sciences. And so I went back to Raymond and asked for an update on that, a Coeur d'Alene term that would capture all of that, and he's done that. And so you'll note that that's been updated and a name change that captures all of the disciplines and the instruction in that building. And so those are before you tonight, and I would ask for your approval so we could move these forward.
Question?
Certainly.
We have one that's in the book, and then I have one here with a 3-hole punch. Should we take that one out and put this one in? Are they different?
It is different. The one that was in front of you tonight is the updated one. The 3-hole punch, at that time, we didn't have the information about the renaming of the Meyer Health and Science Center. Okay. Since that time, just 2 days ago, we received that update, and so that's what was in front of you tonight. Okay. And the only change in that, Trustee Banducci, is that name for the Meyer Health and Science Center.
All right, thank you.
All right. Board, any questions of Graydon? Trustee Howard.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve the dual names contained on the updated certificate. I think that there are 19 names on there.
Total.
I mean, when I counted them, they're not numbered, so I think we ought to identify them. I would ask you to pronounce each one of them for us. Short of that, we'll just go ahead and approve.
Thank you. I'd be real glad to do that. Like the first one is the North Idaho Collaborative Education Center. Is that what you meant?
No.
Exactly. It's perfect.
I think we need an expert in here, not Graydon.
But I would like to move the approval of the dual names on this of the 19 items.
I have a motion. Do I have a second to that motion?
Sure.
Thank you. Trustee Murray. A discussion? Trustee Banducci.
I had a question. I read your tab 1, so, and I see the correction because that was one of the things. Also, not to sound like a killjoy, but I'm kind of curious. Under financial impact, it's kind of to be determined. Placards, standalone signs, I guess it's going to be a mixture of signage depending on the facility and the location. Any idea what we're looking at?
Chair Wood, Trustee Banducci, we don't have an exact price. If my colleague, Vice President Martin, has something he can update us on, that would be great. There are two things that we're looking at, not only the placard on the building, and that precedent has been set when you see some of what's done on campus. The story tour, though, is going to ask for more information in other places on campus that are outside the buildings as well. So we're actually looking at two different items that way.
And Madam Chair.
I'll let Chris answer real quick.
Well, I just need to amend my motion because there are 20 names on the list.
Oh, okay. Can I have a second to his amendment? Thank you, Trustee Murray. Chris, you, along with you answering approximate cost as best you can, I'm assuming that we're doing some of this ourselves.
Chair Wood.
Yes.
We are doing this ourselves. We're costing this out right now based on the final version of this. Facilities did an initial review, but based on the final version, there's a per letter cost. That's how we've done this in the past. And so to Trustee Howard's point, I believe we're only putting 11 new signs up of the 20. So we only have 11 of these that we haven't done. And so there's a per letter cost that we're calculating right now. We don't have a final total on that, but we're looking at adding this into the FY19 budget.
Okay.
We talk, if
Go
I may.
ahead.
So this is inclusive of everything we've already had named previously. Now, ballpark, we talking hundreds, thousands?
Chair Wood.
Any idea?
Trustee Banducci, we're talking thousands to do all of these letters in the same style we've done the others, and on the lower end of the thousands.
Okay. Trustee Dunlap.
I noticed that the CTE facility is not on here, and I may have missed something by being the newest person here. Is there an intent to have that named as well?
Chair Wood and Trustee Dunlap, we've had that discussion. At this point, we've left facilities that are outside of our campus off of that. Workforce development, you would note, is not on there as well. That'll be a continuing discussion and something that would come back in front of the board if that 9-point committee makes that recommendation. As this was originally the gathering ground, you know, close to the river, we stuck with main campus at this point. Thank you.
Okay. Board, we had a motion and we had a second. We had an amended motion and a second. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passed. Thank you.
Thank you very
Work on
much.
this. All right, we're going to go on to our new business and our first reading of our Head Start policy of child records procedure. Beth Ann Fuller with our first reading. Thank you. Thank you.
Chair Wood, trustees, Dr. McLennan, thank you for allowing me to come to present the first reading of our Head Start Privacy of Child Records Procedure. Our newest Head Start program performance standards have established procedures on that Head Start programs must all establish procedures on data management and have them approved by the governing board and policy council in areas such as the quality of data and the effective sharing of data while protecting the privacy of child records at all times. So in accordance with this program performance standards subpart C and part 1303, and also making sure that we are in compliance with all applicable federal, state, local, and tribal laws, our policy council impassionedly came up with a wonderful privacy of child records procedure that incorporated all of the procedures that we've had in the past, but put them all in one place that is succinct and meets all of the qualifications we're hoping of the new performance standard, including all the new definitions of terminology of child records, the three different types of disclosure of child records and those consents of those disclosures. It also talks about written agreements and what we would do if we had any kind of a conflict with any of our agencies that we have community partnerships with, and if they were to ever violate the personal identifiable information and confidentiality of our children in our program. It establishes a specific definition for an annual notice It also defines out very well parental rights in terms of all of the disclosure of child records. And then it also identifies and talks about the maintenance of those records. So within this document then has all those elements, and I'm hoping that if you have any questions, I may be able to answer them.
Thank you, Beth Ann. Board, do you have any questions? Trustee Howard.
Beth Ann, this is something that I don't think we could sit here and tell you whether it's a good policy or not a good policy, not having any real background in it. And I guess I'm wondering, where did it come from? Yeah, if it's dictated in large part by statutory requirements, both on the federal and state level, as well as the tribe, did this format come from some source? Did you make it all up collectively? How was it generated?
So this specific procedure was a culmination of looking at all the elements of the performance standard and making sure that we met those. But it was also a lot of information from our parents in terms of things like time frames around disclosure of information and what they felt was a reasonable amount of time to give parents time to, for an example, respond if we were going to disclose information to, let's say, an example, a school district is asking for information about a child. So our parents had the opportunity to look at the performance standard and come up with the timelines and some of the procedures around how we would do those specific disclosures. They also had some input definitely into how we would handle if we had to deny for a period of time someone's access because they violated our policy or our procedure. How would we go about that? So on page 2 of 4, under the last bullet, written agreements, it very specifically talks about protecting the personal identifiable information and how we would handle that if that happened. And it would be I guess a situation by situation basis. Our governing board liaison and policy council would work together and come up with what the time frame was going to be for which we would not disclose information to that agency for a period of time.
Can I have a follow-up on that?
Certainly.
My concern on this is that this has significant legal ramifications. The procedure does. And if it's not in conformance with what is expected by the national organization, and if the parents have gone through and modified it, which is great, I mean, to have them have their input on it, but I want to make sure that somebody's looked at it from the standpoint of, yes, this still complies with the statutory requirements that are set forth in various areas. I mean, and if it's not, we need to know that. If you had just used a format that was provided by the national organization, that's one thing. But if this is a composite of a number of different documents, then somebody, I think, needs to review this from a legal standpoint to make sure that you're still in compliance with those statutes, so that we know to approve it from a standpoint of, yes, this has been reviewed on, not just by the parents, but also in compliance with the federal and state and local laws. Has that been done?
And I appreciate that. And what has been done so far is only us looking at all of the different elements of the performance standard and seeing that we met those in what it's asking us to do, such as establish your procedure for this. I would welcome that input to look at it from a legal standpoint to make sure that we didn't make any mistakes in terms of what it's saying, because it is about parental rights and it is about disclosures of private information. So, and it does involve things such as, you know, the kind of information that we share with school districts and with child protection agencies and guardian ad litems and all different types of disclosures that we come across in our work. So
Well, I mean, people are always looking for information on different aspects of Head Start. And some of the information you can disclose on a non-personal basis, just statistically. Some you give personal identifiable information on. And the implications of that are pretty significant. And so I want to, before I agreed to vote for this, I would like to be assured that this is in compliance with those statutes. And if you had just used a form that has already been approved, that would give me some sense of peace. But if this is a compilation of a number of different documents, I think it needs to be reviewed by somebody.
And I would add, Mr. Trustee Howard, that in my other life as law enforcement, Mr. Lyon and I didn't agree at all on this topic. and we went round and round about it. And, you know, he put together the policy and procedure for K-12. And so there is a really good resource just to follow what has had a legal review. Anyway, Trustee Banducci.
Well, actually, I'm going to add a little bit to what Trustee Howard said, because I was kind of thinking a couple things, and then he touched on some of it, because in my industries, insurance and security is very highly regulated. Most of the directives come from the federal level, maybe through the state, through the different jurisdictional oversight bodies, whether it be a FINRA or an SEC or a state insurance commission or whatever. And rarely does it go up, and rarely do we get to create things. If we do create something, whether it be a marketing piece or an advertising piece or even an educational or instructional piece, usually has to go back up through compliance, whatever chain of command that is, and sometimes up to the federal level, and the agency has to approve it. I guess my thought, kind of with where Ken is headed here, is there an organization or agency or a group within the federal government with the oversight over your program, since it's federally driven, that would have that ability to review this for the legal aspects of it for your usage, if we don't have maybe a local expertise. But to me, I'd almost be more comfortable if it went back up your chain of command, if you will, to use that term, because I would think there's got to be somewhere there that could be reviewed. And I think it's great what you've done. I like the idea. Who knows, they may see it and go, we should, you know, take this and run with it and distribute it out. You maybe have done a real good thing for them here, you know, did the work for them. So, but yeah, I like the idea of a review, but I almost think it should be within your chain of command, within your organization, you know, of the oversight, whether that's state or directly to the feds. I mean, and that's just from my experience in my couple industries, because I've done a little bit of that myself. So.
Well, I would elaborate on that the oversight for our purposes is us, but with federal guidelines.
Exactly, but I think Ken's right. We would be, I think it would be inappropriate for us to approve this until we've explored.
Sure. We're just at first
what
reading.
the review process should be on this appropriately.
And I would ask Mr. Lyon to comment on his experience with a very similar policy for K-12.
But we love the work. I love the work. I think it's a great idea.
Certainly, thank you, Chair Wood. Many of these programs that receive federal funding, in fact almost all of them, have regulations that deal with privacy when they're dealing with patients, students, and perhaps unlikely this situation. So this has, in scanning through this, this has some of the attributes of what we are concerned about at the college and student privacy, and at the K-12, the FERPA requirements. But there are usually specific things that have to be complied with in terms of timing, what sort of information is available, to whom it's available, and under what terms. So there's probably a couple of things here that need to happen. Probably go up to maybe the regional center and see if they have a model policy that we can look at, and then certainly my office, we deal with FERPA and HIPAA issues all the time. I can check and see if there. Sometimes that's as easy as doing a search of the federal agency's website. So I'd be happy to do that. But I think before this board would approve it as a governing board, we should make sure it is in compliance with federal law.
Certainly. Great. Trustee Dunlap.
Beth Ann, I have a question, and I'm just trying to put this into perspective. The board has a responsibility to develop and approve policy. You refer to this as procedures. And so is there an overarching policy that this falls underneath?
This is actually the only procedure that I have come across at this point in our new performance standards that asks for the board to also give its approval of an actual procedure and not a policy. So, and I think because of the importance of the data and records privacy, they've made this a real new focus in the performance standards. They have not given us a specific template, but they have guided us to some of the places where we could receive a template, which we purchased, and it was from a legal organization. But typically, without any, like judgment about this, our Office of Head Start, that's part of the Department of Health and Human Services, typically, because they ask that the parents govern the program, find ways for parents to give input on some of these pieces, but they do not usually give us a specific guide and say you must do it exactly this way for that reason. And it can be somewhat unwieldy and frustrating, because we'd love sometimes in situations such as this to be given a very specific template, but I have not yet to see them do that because of the nature of how our program is governed. They want that input on this, and I totally agree. Even though we did buy this from a legal company and went through it and made sure we met all of that it's just one specific company selling a product that we felt was important to purchase, just because so we could have that kind of background guideline. Some other local programs just made an attempt to just come up with their own, and we also looked at each and every one of the ones that we were able to get our hands on to see if we'd missed anything, if they had any other input. But I totally understand your reticence to just approve something without that oversight legally because of the ramifications.
Beth Ann, do you have a FERPA policy?
We do, yes.
Trustee Banducci.
One more question, if I may. Just, again, because of the industries I work with and the way the insurance works and CMS and the different things, usually when you see PII, you also see PHI, and then you see HIPAA also. They're pretty much linked at the hip. I notice I don't see the PHI or the HIPAA. Is the premise here that under what we call the PII, the information here, that none of it would be medical in its nature, and it's strictly name, social security number, date of birth, that sort of thing, what we would call the PII, and that in the files that you guys have, there wouldn't be anything that would relate to the others?
And we would follow all of those FERPA guidelines and HIPAA guidelines. Our general sense when we do have disclosures of information, if we're not the editors of that information, we don't disclose it. We ask them to go to the doctor to get it, or go to the source to get that information, such as if a child has an IEP, we don't just send out the IEP because somebody asked us for it. We say, you really need to get that from the school district.
Okay.
If that helps at all?
Yeah. I just was, because then it was also asked if you had a separate FERPA, policy. So there's a lot of those stuff that get.
Right.
Chris?
They go together, but that's why I was just curious.
Do we loan out legal advice, or do they have their own attorney on staff?
We use the NIC attorney for Head Start matters.
Okay, so I'm gathering, board, that you would like this to be legally reviewed?
I'd like to have some assurances that it has all the components necessary in order to satisfy the statutes and regulations.
Would that, sorry.
Go ahead.
As part of that legal review, not just here locally and with the assets, but you were talking about a regional center or up the Head Start chain of command also, that be inclusive if that's appropriate, or if there's
Well,
such a vehicle?
I would think we would leave that to Mr. Lyons. He has the contacts and.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So what we're talking about is broad in that scope, that he has the authority or discretion to.
Thank you, Board. Thank you for your report. Oh, go ahead.
Do you need to make a motion on that?
No, it's a first reading.
Is there a timing issue on approval of this? Does this have to be approved by a certain time?
No.
Okay, so if it takes more than a month to go through and do the review and that sort of thing, we're not going to be putting you in any difficult position?
No.
Okay.
Do we have to do anything to expend the resources?
No, that's part of our overview already.
That's what I thought. I just want to make
Okay.
sure I was clear on that.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Appreciate you coming. That takes us
Thanks,
to
Beth Ann.
tab 3, first reading, information technology, policy 3.08.03. Actually, Chris Martin's going to handle the next 3 policies.
Chair Wood, members of the board, Ken Wardinsky, our CIO, sends his regrets. He has caught in the bug that's going around. So he asked me to stand in this evening, so I apologize for the poor
Oh, tell him
stand-in.
to keep it home, that's
For
fine.
our Chief Information Officer. In keeping with the conversation around data, privacy, and security, the next 3 policies are essentially just that. This first policy regards our data stewardship, security, and protection. I would note that from my personal perspective, Kim Wardinsky, our Chief Information Officer, and the IT Policy and Planning Council has done a really deep dive into ensuring our compliance and really reviewing our IT policies. This first one simply puts into perspective that all data NIC has in our possession is our data. NIC is the owner and controller of that data, and the greatest benefit of data is gained through a shared and thoughtful use, but can be quickly diminished if it's not used appropriately and protected. And then access to non-public data needs to be managed based on sensitivity, value, and its critical needs for the college. So this policy, in place with other related policies, is set to achieve an appropriate mix of those 3 common elements: information security, confidentiality, integrity, and availability.
Thank you. Board, any questions of Chris on policy 3.0803?
I do have a question.
Trustee Howard.
And this may cross over into the other policies that we're going to discuss, but these policies seem to apply to data. And I guess I'm concerned, do we have on other policies that deal with NIC's policy with regard to all kinds of social media and that sort of thing? And the reason I ask is, in my other life as a lawyer, I just ended up going to a seminar on school law, and one of the big issues, quite frankly, was the control of content in social media on campus and with regard to like a Facebook account and that sort of thing. When the institution can control it, how it interfaces with free speech and First Amendment protections. And I don't see anything in any of these policies that deal with that kind of, and the takeaway from at least the seminar I went to was the institution ought to have some pretty good policies with regard to how they can, if they can prohibit or control content in any of the social media used on campus or within the campus area. And so I didn't see anything in this area. It dealt with data, so apparently data that belonged to the institution. But is there other policy, or are we going to get into something where we set up a policy with how NIC deals with defamatory information, pornography, things that are we don't want to appear on the media being used, whether it's web page or any kind of comments? What's our policy on that?
Chair Wood, Trustee Howard, there is a use policy that every user agrees to as they access the internet at NIC that relates to some of the key pieces that you spoke to. From a social media standpoint, currently the only group that we monitor is our student athletes, and it's for their benefit and protection. And we work with the athletic teams so that students can put their best foot forward on social media.
So is there a separate policy other than these three that deals with that?
There is an acceptable use policy that regards access to the internet that every user who accesses the internet agrees to in relationship to pornography, other uses of the internet, such as accessing. I think we've had issues in the past with some of the terroristic websites that restricts that access or puts it in a non-acceptable use.
So we'll
there is a group that does address that.
So we've either already approved that or we will be approving it?
I'm sure it's coming up for review.
Okay.
President McLennan?
Chris, I just have a question. I don't know if this is a question for you or maybe Laura or Ken, but under the Section 3 data classifications, it talks about restrictive, sensitive, and public, and it talks about protecting data from unauthorized access, which is a different question than information that's subject to a Freedom of Information request. And so does that need to be addressed in here, or is that addressed in a Freedom of Information policy? Because I could see where an individual may think that certain data is protected or restricted, but on the other hand, it could be subject to a Freedom of Information request.
Chair Wood, Trustee Dunlap, this does specifically just speak to how we manage and secure that data. The Freedom of Information is handled through Laura's office, and there is a process for that piece. But this really speaks to how we're controlling that data within our system.
Okay, thank you.
President McLennan?
I just picking up on the social media and the typically where we end up dealing with that. Grady, you might want to speak to this, but it's really more on the student conduct side. It's really the behavior that comes through those communications. It's not necessarily about protected data or, and so where we get into the gray area then is for Title IX, for example, you may have a Title IX complaint that arises out of a social media interaction that happens outside of the workplace, but it involves college employees. And so there's probably some discussion that we need to have there.
Great, thank you. Board, any further questions on this specific policy, 3.0803? Hearing none, we'll move on, Chris, to 3.0804.
Chair Wood, Trustees, this really just speaks to when issues occur, how we handle those, and specifically our response to technology incidents. In summary, this simply states that a user who has access to NIC assets or data is required to report any loss, misuse, theft, exposure, or other activity that may harm or threaten IT assets. Very simply, if you lose a laptop that belongs to NIC, you're required to let IT know so that we can lock that down and clean that remotely. If you are part of a phishing scam and someone tries to infect NIC through an email that's sent to you, you have a responsibility to contact the help desk and say, this happened, so that we can secure the network as a whole.
Yeah, I recall the city IT threatening me if I lost my iPhone, all my stuff is gone. I didn't like that. So, but necessary. Trustee Murray.
So through orientation process, students hear that message, and or how does that message get put out there?
Chair Wood, Trustee Murray, this even more specifically speaks to faculty and staff users. Okay. And so that if they have in their possession NIC IT assets, when they receive those, get briefed on, if you lose this laptop, you have to let us know, and what those processes are.
Any further questions on this specific policy? Hearing none, we'll move on to the next one, Chris, which is 3.0805.
Chair Wood, members of the board, this is also maybe at a very elementary level, but very clearly states that we require user authentication to access NIC IT assets. So if you're going to be part of the network and access our network, you have to have a NIC issued user ID and password as part of basic common security for IT.
Okay. Any questions on this latest policy? These are all first readings. You'll have time to digest them even further, but I think you've all done a very nice job on this.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that takes us on to the board chair report. I'd had a couple of items. I did get a chance to talk to President McLennan. Now that Judy is left for the evening, I did talk with him specifically about emeritus status, and certainly she comes to mind. And so emeritus status for trustees that have gone above and beyond and dedicated years, over a decade of their life to the college. And I know the foundation has policy on how they choose an emeritus, and they might be a good source. If all of you are interested in something, I'd like to ask the president to move forward, look at some policy on emeritus, and maybe come back to us. And she'd certainly be a great candidate, so I'd like your feedback on that. Anyone?
Yeah, no, the idea of emeritus status has some attraction, but it really needs to be well-defined, I think. Very long-standing service, obviously, as a trustee, and what that length of time is should be, I think, for significant, extraordinary, but also maybe other components to it. So I hope that we've put some thought into how we define emeritus. And Judy probably would qualify for it on many levels, but I think we need to define that carefully. The other thing that I'd maybe like to comment on, just as we're talking about this, I mean, the emeritus status would be a thank you, a big thank you for all the time and effort that a trustee has put in. But I also think that there's some small things that we can do to retiring or retired trustees. I don't know why we don't give them a lifetime athletic pass. It's such a small thing, but it is a acknowledgement of what they've done. Maybe even a lifetime parking pass. I don't know. There's not that many trustees, but when they leave, I don't know that we don't want them to leave the organization. We don't want them to leave the institution. We want to invite them to come back and still participate in a lot of the activities. And I think we could encourage that by offering up lifetime athletic passes and maybe parking passes. I don't know what the rest of the trustees think about that.
I like that. I know Dr. McLennan had some thoughts on that. I certainly think Todd would use some of the athletic pass someday. And you had some thoughts on that. We discussed that, if you wanted to share your thoughts.
Oh, I just agree wholeheartedly that we need to define what that looks like. I mean, there's a whole range of things you can do. You can create a memorial plaque in the boardroom that commemorates all of your emeriti trustees. There can be access to technology privileges. There can be passes to athletic events. I think we already give a lifetime parking pass, or we've done that.
To trustees.
And then also, but also the formal recognition that comes with that, and what does that look like, and how do you manage that? So, yeah, I'm very happy, and in fact, excited to look at that and create a framework for the board to take a look at and approve.
Yeah, and if we could do it, fairly quickly, so that we can use Judy as our first recipient, as, like the lifetime athletic pass and that sort of thing. I think we need to go back and recognize other trustees that have been here, and I mean, it shouldn't just be for Judy, but there's not that many.
Right.
I think trustees who are still around that would probably like that.
And so I have a question for the board. Emeritus could take a bit of time if we want to construct a policy. So outside of emeritus, what about the idea of just the parking pass and the athletic pass immediately?
So Judy already has a lifetime parking pass.
Good.
I saw it on her place today when she picked up her materials. We can certainly do something with athletics as well. That's the board's desire.
That's the board's desire?
Yes.
Perfect. All right, thank you for that. Okay. My other item is I need to help with Shannon schedule time in March for a planning workshop for the board sometime around the 1st of March. Trustee Murray, when do you come home?
Who wants to know?
All of us.
I'll be back in March.
Okay, well, I shouldn't ask for a specific day. We are on camera. Okay, but are you available in March? Yes. Okay. And so apparently you want to put together a workshop. Do you want to speak to that?
Sure. We'll be at the stage. We won't obviously be completed, and we don't want to present a completed plan to the board without the board's opportunity to interact with the work that's underway. So we will have starting in mid-February and going to mid-March, we'll be conducting a number of open, some community forums and interactions with key stakeholder groups and things like that. The academic plan, the facility master plan, the IT plan are all on path and coming together. You've seen some work on the SWOT analysis. We've got a scan group that's collecting a whole bunch of data about what's going on in the world and what's going on in our region. And so I thought it would be a pretty good time in that early to mid-March timeframe to just bring the board up to speed, answer questions, get more input, as we said we would do along the way.
Great. All right.
Probably take, at least 2 hours. If we wanted to take a little longer, that would be useful as well.
Great. Trustee Dunlap.
I will be gone the first week in March, but we'll be back the remainder of the month.
All right. So, board, then I will ask Shannon to coordinate with all of us, as she does so well, and with the president's office, and we will find a date. With that, I would open it up to remarks for the good of the order.
No, you get to use the gavel.
Well, I will, but I forgot something under my report. So I'll do it under the good of the order. I've had the pleasure of meeting twice now with the foundation, and yesterday met with Sue Thilo and Rael with the foundation for orientation. And just in the 2 meetings that I've attended, I am just amazed at the work they do, and I know that you're very familiar with it, Mr. Howard, but what an eye-opener of what they do for this institution and the money they raise and the students they help. And so I'm excited about being part of that. There is an event coming up in February. I don't know the exact date off the top of my head, but it is, you went to it last year, it was the Anthony's event, and I think that would be really fun. To as many board members that can go, let's do it. Let's support the foundation, and I will report back to them what all of you we're doing on this board, and then I'll report back to you what they're doing. Laura, go ahead.
At the very end of your agenda with upcoming events, it's February the 27th at 5:30 at Anthony's in Riverstone.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you. And
You're
from what I understand, you can go online to reserve your tickets and pay online. So, and Anthony's does all of this, and all of the proceeds go to scholarships at the foundation. So,
Can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
So this is the 40th anniversary of the foundation, founded in 1977. Tickets for the event are $77.
thank you. All right, so any other remarks for the good order? Hearing none, I'm not going to gavel us closed. We are going to ask you to excuse us. We're going to go into executive session. So if you would, please excuse us. Oh, we're going to go next door. Take your time leaving. Thank you.
Depends. Oh, yeah.